Welcome to The Lens, hosted by Catalysis, where we get a glimpse inside healthcare organizations that are transforming to a culture of improvement to deliver continually higher value outcomes for patients, staff, and communities. Visit createvalue.org for more information about Catalysis.
Welcome back to The Lens. I'm your host, Peter Mariazzi. Joining us today on The Lens is Jason Cooper. Jason is the Vice President of Operations at Endsight, and Endsight is an IT services provider based in California. Sounds a little unusual for the listeners, I know, but Jason is here to share his learnings from joining Catalysis at an executive site visit with our friends at OhioHealth. Here's the story. Jason was able to attend the LEI and Catalysis Summit in Atlanta earlier this year. And during that event, he heard from the OhioHealth team, and he was inspired to go see that culture in action. Thank you for joining us today, Jason. Please introduce yourself and insight to the listeners.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be here. So I'll start with Endsight. Endsight is a managed services provider. We've been in business since the early 2000s, 2004. And for those who might not know what a managed services provider is, it's essentially an IT outsourcing organization. So we provide all level of IT services that you could imagine to small and medium-sized businesses, some of which have internal IT, some of which do not. And so we offer a wide range of services like monitoring, alerting, patch management, IT projects, and then in these days, a lot of AI consulting, automation, security, development services, fintech, those types of services. So that's what Endsight is. We're about 140 employees, so relatively small compared probably to most of the organizations that your listeners participate in. So me personally, Jason Cooper, as was already mentioned, I've been in IT consulting since the 90s and had a small business in Northern California that was sold. We sold to Endsight in 2017. And then within Endsight, I've had lots of different roles. Currently, actually serving as the COO, just recently moved out of the VP of Operations role. But continuous improvement is a practice that I manage and direct at Endsight. And so that's I could go on about personal things, but I'll keep it to the business introduction at this point.
Thank you, Jason. And I know that, our CEO, Carlos and Chris Weisbrod have been in contact and discussion with you guys about just ways to share and learn and collaborate. So that's pretty exciting because obviously AI in healthcare and technology in healthcare is moving at a blistering speed.
Yeah,
So over the
absolutely.
years, yep. And so over the years, we've shared with healthcare professionals the best way to see how a culture of improvement works is to go see it for themselves. And Jason, you shared that you became very interested in going to Gemba from the Ohio Health presentation at the summit. What did you hear there that made you think, hey, I got to go see this in action?
So there were really two things. The first was their CEO, Stephen Markovich, who had a keynote presentation. A number of items that he shared really attracted me to for one, his leadership, the fact that from the CEO executive level, it was very clear from their culture, his commitment to continuous improvement. And that was very clear in his presentation. The fact that they had executive support to essentially block across to the entire hospital organization times every day where leadership could go to Gemba. That's an example of a real commitment to continuous improvement. So listening to him and his long tenure as both a doctor and in administration and then senior leadership at the hospital, I was very impressed with his commitment to continuous improvement and driving that at all levels of the organization. That attracted me a lot to the journey of continuous improvement at OhioHealth, including their really audacious goal of 35,000 problem solvers. So very, I was wanted to see already what that looked like in practice, just from the keynote. Then there was a breakout session that was led by Emily Sweeney, who is the director of, they don't call it continuous improvement, but it's the director of that practice. And there were many elements there that were attractive to me. So first of all, there's only 6 of them. So 35,000 frontline workers, 6 continuous improvement professionals. I thought, how is this possible? So how is that enough resource? So I needed to go see that team in action, if you will. But a lot of that speaks to their focus on building continuous improvement frameworks that can be deployed at scale. And so aside from the Gemba, the standard Gemba blocks that executives participate in and management participates in, I was also very intrigued with they created systems of what I'll call line of sight between their balanced scorecard, which is really their organization's highest level objectives and goals, line of sight between those all the way down to every frontline worker within the hospital system. And I was very intrigued to see how they built that and how it actually worked in practice. So between the breakout session, well, I was already hooked with the CEO keynote, but by the time I went through the breakout session, I said, okay, I'm going to go see how this operates. Also, lastly, because it's healthcare, it's a service industry. And we at Endsight are a service industry. We don't make widgets. And so our own journey of continuous improvement has been one that's been challenged because we've needed to translate so much of the lean literature, continuous improvement literature from a manufacturing environment into a service industry. So those were the elements, Peter, that caused me to just say, I got to go see how they're doing this.
Excellent. So let me ask you the aha question. So what can you share what really jumped out at you from the site visit? First thing that just kind of popped out and really jumped at you.
Well, again, there were a number of things that jumped out, but one of the things that was extremely interesting for me is when we went through, so the site visit, first of all, was incredibly supported by the executive group. I was very surprised. I was more expecting what I'll call like a flyby of the CEO, the hospital president, the COO, shaking hands, how you doing? Thanks for coming. That's what I expected because they're very busy. I would not have expected the amount of investment that executive group gave to our cohort. It was amazing. So the first thing is I was very surprised by the level of engagement. And then secondly, the level of transparency. So to allow a group of visitors into what they've built, what's called a tiered huddle system. So essentially their goal is to be able to address and escalate issues that are arising at the operational level, starting at the frontline worker level, all the way up to the most senior executives within a couple of hours. And even that as a statement is audacious for many of us. And even with 140 employees, it's audacious. For them to be able to execute that at scale really was amazing. And what jumped out at me is we basically engaged in that huddle of that day. We started with level 1 and we followed through the organization as they worked through their tiers, and they essentially allowed us to see all of it. And it's dirty. Problems are messy. They are how problems are both surfaced and managed at various levels of the organization. They've got. It was amazing to me that they were as transparent with us as they were, as willing to open the doors, and I learned a tremendous amount in watching their tiered escalation system work. One other thing that really stood out to me, I alluded before to the alignment of their balanced scorecard to the continuous improvement efforts underway at the frontline worker level. And that was extremely evident. So there was essentially a bulletin board at every station, at every Gemba station. And on every bulletin board was the balance scorecard, which was updated. They were even updating it the day in which we had done our Gemba walks. They had just released an updated balance scorecard. What was fascinating is that the actual improvement activities, for example, I was at a nurse's station and they were working on a particular issue which had to do with improving the rate at which they were providing new mothers with lactation consulting. That was the specific area of improvement. But those nurses at that station knew exactly how, if they could improve that particular area, it was going to move the needle on the balance scorecard, which is an aggregate of the efforts of 35,000 people aligning to their mission and their goals. So that really jumped out at me as an area where Endsight could really improve.
So, during our conversation, you shared that you could see value delivered from the CEO all the way through the front line, and you could see that. Why did that connect with you? How did you perceive that and catch that?
Yeah. So as a service provider ourselves, our entire orientation is around creating value for our customers. And we have many different service delivery areas, lots of, I'll call it surface area, touch points, places in which we can create value and a real positive experience for our customers. Hospitals are like that too. And so as I observed, for example, there was an issue that was raised in one of the stand-ups where one of the managers was essentially seeking guidance from the hospital president on how to take care of a patient who had lost a child. So a lot of times they've got systems for celebrating births of children, but they didn't have standard work, if you will, for what happens when a patient loses a child. And right then and there, right in the huddle, the hospital president said, "Approved. Go do it. Follow your instinct. Care for this patient who's now suffering through the loss of a child." It was fantastic. It was human. It was a decision made right in the moment that allowed that manager to go enable a frontline worker to create value, essentially, human value. I saw that at essentially every level. I mentioned before the example, the effort to improve the percentage of new mothers who were receiving lactation consulting, because the hospital understands that outcomes are better when each of those mothers receive that consulting. They have a better outcome for mama and for the new baby. That is incredible value. And there are reasons why they were struggling with providing that consulting, right? It wasn't a lack of wanting to do it. It was the challenges of operating a hospital, the demands of operating a hospital, which I don't understand, but I certainly understand the demands of delivering IT services, right? So each of
Right.
us that are listening to this, we all understand our own demands and the things that get in the way of creating value. But it was extremely clear to me that from Stephen, the CEO, all the way through to Emily and her team, and what they were trying to do was to remove the obstacles and the barriers of that get in the way of creating value to our customers. And it was very apparent to me that the operating system, the management system was designed to maximize value creation.
That's great. And that is, it's very much a human thing. And the value to the customer is the value to the patient, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
that's where their focus is. So, you mentioned the balanced scorecard and during the visit with that, help us understand, how do you think that'll help you at Ensight? How are you going to take that and incorporate in what you do? And by the way, congratulations on the COO title now. So thank you for sharing that. But how's the balanced scorecard and that tiering and sharing? Again, you have 140 approximately team members. How are you going to take that and apply it there? Help us look into your world a little bit.
Yeah. So at Insight, we have what we call a one-page plan. The one-page plan is similar to the balanced scorecard, but the balanced scorecard is a little more mature than our one-page plan. And it's a little more mature in a couple of ways. One is it aggregates success criteria in a number of areas and rolls those up into scores that are simple to digest. So the big power, the main power that I found in the way that OhioHealth was using their balanced scorecard is connecting how frontline workers can contribute to the success. That's the piece that I found is lacking at Endsight where we can do better. So at Endsight, as an example, of course, we have quarterly all hands meetings and we share updates on how we're progressing on our annual initiatives and how we're progressing on our one-page plan. So there is transparency. It's very different though. OhioHealth has taken that to the next level. So if I want to go see a continuous improvement effort in one of our service delivery areas or say, what types of things are you working on and how do those connect to our organizational goals? I think many of our team would have a hard time articulating that.
Excellent.
And I want to connect. I want them to see the connection. I think we need for them to see the connection because the improvement measures and steps that they're taking do matter. We see the connection, but I don't know that they do. Does that make sense, Peter?
It makes so much sense. And in particular, because if they are connected, and we've talked about this on the lens before, if they feel connected to those overarching goals and initiatives and desires of the organization, that also helps direct their everyday activity. In other words,
Mhm.
if they're interacting with one of your customers, they have now a real good understanding of how they can respond to provide that value and support what the organization is trying to accomplish in providing value to your customers. So by doing that and having that connection and them understanding it in a simple way helps them translate that to daily activity, what they're doing in the moment.
I agree 100%. And I think it'll help to supercharge their desire to engage in improvement. And I believe very strongly that the workers doing the work are the best people to engage in how to improve that work. And so to the extent that we can connect that for them so that they see that as they're improving the value and that we're the efficiency and the value we're delivering to our clients, that actually has a direct influence on our one-page plan in OhioHealth. It's their balanced scorecard. So connecting that line of sight, clear line of sight is something that as I left the OhioHealth on site, it really has caused me to think about ways to both clarify, further clarify what our goals and objectives are and connect that to the work the improvement efforts and really the work that our frontline workers are doing every day in delivering value to our clients.
Excellent, excellent. Um, you mentioned it earlier, you mentioned as one of the things you were most excited about is the tiered huddle system was on display at Ohio Health, and I just happened to also be up at this site visit. I don't go to many, but what you mentioned one example of a resolution, if you will, in the if a child is lost. But
Mhm.
can you share with the listeners some of the examples of escalations or resolution that you saw, and how do you see that tiered huddle system potentially being used at Endsight?
Yeah. So there were a number of challenges that surfaced on our particular day when we were there. One of the challenges that surfaced was the result of a building project that they have going on there, where they have taken down a parking structure to build what I believe is a women's hospital,
Mm-hmm.
hospital for women's services, which I'm very happy for them about. I think that's amazing. And the challenge of not having places to park has created a lot of headaches for their workers getting to their place of work on time because their parking has been disrupted. And what I observed, so of course the management team had prepared for this in some fashion, like we all try to do when we anticipate we're making a change and what are the countermeasures? So they had implemented shuttle systems and all kinds of other ways to get their workers from remote parking lots to their place of work. Okay, well, it wasn't working super well, and there were lots of challenges that were being surfaced. So one of the things that I noticed as we moved through the tiered system is the problem of parking and people getting to work on time kept moving up it wasn't a problem that could be resolved at tier 1. It wasn't a problem that could be solved at tier 2, right? This was a big problem, and the folks who needed to address it were at levels 3 and 4 and 5. Well, as that problem continued to bump up the tiered huddle system, it was fascinating and exciting for me to see that the president of that particular hospital was with us all day, and he was going to spend his next morning, guess what, riding a shuttle. So this was going to the Gemba, seeing the problem firsthand as in the best possible example I could imagine. Here he is, he's going to go get on the shuttle and figure out what's not working. So the fact that problem surfaced, got to the right level, and that then the president of the hospital was going to clear his calendar so that he'd go ride a shuttle bus the next morning at whatever earliest time the earliest workers are coming in, I thought was amazing and was a really good illustration of how leaders need to swarm to problems so that we can see for ourselves, if necessary, what's actually happening so that we can put the best possible countermeasures in place. So that was one example of watching that escalation. There were others, and I can give more if you're interested. But let me pivot to what does this mean for Endsight? So at Endsight, we do have huddles, but we also are a distributed workforce. So we do have physical offices, one in San Diego and one in Napa, California, but the vast majority of our team is remote. So I converting, if you will, coming up with an Endsight version of what they're doing is necessary. So standing in front of a dashboard or a whiteboard, as an example, is not possible. So we're going to need an equivalent tool, something that, and this, as a tangential comment, our lean journey, our continuous improvement journey has been characterized in these necessary customizations of theory. So to read a book about continuous improvement, great, lots of great principles, but trying to apply them directly has not worked. What has worked is understanding what are the tools attempting to solve, what problems are they there to solve, and then our awareness of our own operations and the services that we're delivering has necessitated customized tools that are built for Endsight. So an example of that is one of the benefits of these tiered huddle systems at OhioHealth was the quick, clear escalation of problems to the right level so that they could be addressed quickly. Endsight has a system that we've built that accomplishes something similarly, which is a system we call problem registers, and it allows for anyone in the organization to surface a problem that gets fielded very quickly by their closest manager, which then gets very quickly escalated up a tier. Very similar, but it's virtual. It's virtual, but it's designed to work in a similar fashion. I think that we're missing something, though. The thing that we're missing is that OhioHealth has organized their executive schedule to accommodate those inputs. So at Endsight, I've not organized ourselves that well. As a result, when various executives are seeing these inputs, the problem inputs varies depending on the executive and the service delivery area. think we could do better, right? I think we could align
Yeah.
better because of the way from the Ohio Health model. Does that make sense, Peter?
It does, and I want to share for the listeners again because I was there. By the time it gets to tier level 5, just so the listeners know, there was only one or two items. The rest had been resolved in previous tier meetings, and the huddles are only 15, 20 minutes. I mean, they're not massive, long things, and it's handled very expeditiously. And if there's a needs to be a follow-up afterwards, that happens, fine, but they can escalate it up. But by the time, so at Insight, you may, if you get to the point of where it's truly tiered and coordinated huddles of escalation, then by the time it gets to, the level at tier 4 or 5, whatever you end up with as the final tier or ultimate tier, there may only be one or two things left to do because the rest have been addressed on the way there. Then the rest may just become awareness notifications, as we call in our household here, just to let the top tier people know, hey, this is what happened. Here's how we handled it, and just so you know. And if it comes up again, now you know how we took care of it or what we did to address it. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And of course, doing it virtually um, is a natural for an MSP, and an IT provider to be able to do that way. But now to build the structure. The other part was, and you've hinted at it, is it became clear to me in your conversation with me that you saw that the culture encouraged the solutions in collaboration. It wasn't a competitive who's going to fix it. It's we're here because we want to take care of the patient. That's the value we're offering. So what what steps are you and the team at Insight really looking to incorporate your learnings? How are you spreading it with the leadership team and by extension with the rest of your team members?
Yeah. So one of the things I've got a group of, we call them value stream managers, but essentially it's very similar to the Office of Continuous Improvement. They own certain service delivery areas, improvements to certain service delivery areas. So I work with our value stream managers as well as our general managers and other executives. One of the things that we did is there was a video that Ohio Health provided that oriented us, anyone who wants to watch it, essentially orients us to their system, their continuous improvement system. So I watched that before the Ohio Health visit, and I've now distributed that to our team to watch. So
Right.
basically, the learning that I took out of Ohio Health, a lot of it was powerful and impactful because I was in person, but a lot of it is also talked about in some of these in videos that perhaps you could link to in your show notes.
Mhm.
So essentially me trying to share what is it that I learned. So for example, the details of the balance scorecard, how it functions within their overall lean improvement framework, their management framework. The video is it provides some really good detail, especially around how um, organizational alignment exists. So the goals that come from the executives and the boards of directors, how those goals cascade down to the frontline worker. So part of that is captured in the balance scorecard, but part of it is part of their Hoshin process. And we were able to meet, I don't remember the gentleman's name, unfortunately, but the director of strategic alignment at Ohio Health. He also spent a good 2 hours with us speaking about the alignment that exists between the executives and the improvement team and the management team, the executive team, the managers, and the frontline workers. There's a lot of focus and a framework built around how they approach that. So I've been exposing all of that to our executive group to try to say, where are our gaps and what can we glean? And how can we improve? We have a Hoshin process at Endsight that's about 3 years in its evolution, and we have a long way to go. So watching a more mature organization and how they execute at a higher level, at a higher scale, is very informative for us. More specifically, one of the things that I'm doing is going to Gemba all of our huddles. So I want to go see what's happening in those huddles. Um, how it the Ohio Health design of using those huddles as problem, it's not just one direction. It's not just problems going up. It's also opportunities for information to come to the frontline workers. So it is bidirectional, but I'd say largely it's problem surfacing for escalation and resolution. Um, there are other use cases, I believe, for huddles that maybe not at Ohio Health, but I just happen to have read a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's fantastic. Yeah, I was inspired by their use of huddles as an opportunity to drive values, culture, vision, because you've got your team there. The team is present for these precious moments in which the group is together. So that is another area of evaluation for me is both, are we doing the things that make the Ohio Health huddle system so effective? Are we doing that there or in some other component of our management framework? And then are there other ways that we could plus up that precious time where our teams are together for those few moments, either daily or several times per week? And those are the areas of focus right now, in addition to our team just really absorbing some of the framework that Ohio Health was willing to share with us.
So, Jason, thank you for sharing that because I really am curious to hear if you have any advice you would give to any listeners on what you witnessed and learned. Anything you would you just want to kind of send out to them on ways to maximize this.
So, Peter, that's a great question. The advice part, for one, it's difficult. I don't often offer advice, but for two, I don't know to whom I'm speaking. So, various people are going to attach to this content based on where they're at in an organization and where their organization is at with continuous improvement. However, I'm going to do my best. So, the first thing that I would suggest is is just go. And the reason for that is when I mean just go, I'm really talking about go into the lean community as much as we're able to learn from others. And so I was both incredibly grateful, very humbled by the opportunity that Catalyst extended to be able to go and hang out with the folks at Ohio Health. Tremendous human beings, first of all, with an amazing vision. I was very inspired by that. In addition to all of the very practical learnings, I was able to glean what I gleaned because of the context from which I'm operating. My role within Endsight, our level of maturity, our journey with continuous improvement, for a different organization, a different person, depending on where they're at within the organization, they're going to glean other things. But what I can almost promise is you will glean something. It will be helpful. So that this opportunity, as you alluded to, came out of going to the LEI's annual conference, and I think we're sending 10 people this year to, or in
Right.
2026, we've got 10 members of Insight that are going
Wow.
because we're that committed to this truth that I think as we lean in with curiosity and and understand how other organizations and leaders are approaching continuous improvement within their organizations, we are going to get better. We're going to get ideas that we can bring back. So the first piece of advice is just go ahead and go. Try to make that commitment to participate at some level in the lean community. The second quick bit of advice is that our Insight is 7 years into its lean journey that started with a book club, The Toyota Way to Service Excellence, which is not an easy first book, I'll admit. And I've gone back over that book numerous times. Um, and every time I do, I learn more. The piece of advice is that I didn't understand that these concepts, these tools, these frameworks really need to be adapted to each organization and to the value creation that we are engaging in for our customers. And so to take the idea, what is it that this tool is intended to do? What, for example, if it's notify to win threshold, what is the purpose of the notify to win? How does it exist within my management framework? Okay, well, that's great. So let's ask the question, what other pieces of the lean management system are dependent on that? Like knowing what the goal, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the true north? What does good look like? Which is something that Emily Sweeney talked a lot about at every level of their organization. They understand what good looks like. So the reason why I bring this piece of advice up is that I think it's very important to understand the frameworks and the purpose of the tools, but the application and what it looks like in each organization, I really think needs to be customized. So to give ourselves that freedom to say, it's not going to look like it did at Toyota. Insight's adoption of these tools and frameworks are not going to look exactly like OhioHealth, and yet I can be influenced significantly by the way that they're solving their problems.
Thank you. That's Jason. That's kind of one of our mantras that our founder, Dr. John Toussaint, said is when you've seen one transformation, you've seen one transformation. There are components that are similar, but it's got to be very specific. So, Jason, let me ask you, are there any final thoughts you want to share with the listeners?
Final thoughts. I think we've covered most of the big things, Peter, that were on my mind. Just again, an encouragement to reach out to the lean community, to participate, to not be discouraged with the lean journey, because I have found it to be up and down, and at points taking longer than I would hope to see the types of incremental improvement we were looking for. But I guess the last, I would just encourage everyone, go to the Gemba, put on your curiosity lens or your hat, and it's easy. It's the tendency, depending on where a person's at in the organization, the higher up the organization they're operating, it's the tendency is to want to rely on dashboards and data. And my advice and encouragement is that's great. So that maybe shows you where you might go look, and then go get yourself into where the value is being created. That would be my true north,
Excellent.
as a reminder for myself and everyone
Excellent.
who's trying to engage in continuous improvement.
Excellent. Jason, thank you for joining us today and sharing your experience at OhioHealth. Though, now, in all fairness, if people want to learn more about Endsight, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way would be our website, which is at www.endsight.net.
Thank you. Perfect. And as always, we appreciate you all listening. If you have any suggestions for us, want more information on this topic, or get a hold of Jason, or other topics you'd like us to hear, just email us at events@createvalue.org. And to Jason's advice, Catalysis does organize several site visits each year at healthcare systems that demonstrate advanced cultures. We already have much of the calendar for 2026 ready. And if you want to learn more, go to createvalue.org/sites-visits.
Thank you for listening. Visit createvalue.org to learn more about how Catalysis can inspire you to accelerate change in your organization.